Lesson 107. Indirect speech with questions, imperatives and requests. Questions. What do we do when we change a question from direct into indirect speech?
When we change a question from direct into indirect speech, we move the verb one step back into the past. We use asked instead of said, and we do not use the question form or a question mark.
Give me an example, please.
I asked them what they wanted to drink.
If the question does not contain a question word, what do we use instead?
If the question does not contain a question word, we use the word if or whether instead.
Give me an example, please.
He asked her if or whether she spoke English.
Now, I will ask you some questions, and I want you to tell me what I said. How old are you?
You asked me how old I was.
Do your parents speak English?
You asked me if my parents spoke English.
Can you play the piano?
You asked me if I could play the piano.
Imperatives. Command. What do we do when we change an imperative from direct into indirect speech?
When we change an imperative from direct into indirect speech, we use told, commanded, or ordered, and we use the infinitive without to instead of the imperative.
Give me an example, please.
The king commanded him to leave.
With negative imperatives, what do we do?
With negative imperatives, we put not before the infinitive.
Give me an example, please.
His mum told him not to get home late.
Now, I will give you some orders, and I want you to tell me what I said. Stand up.
You told me to stand up.
Don't look at your book.
You ordered me not to look at my book.
Correct your dictations.
You told me to correct my dictations.
Requests. What do we do when we change a request from direct into indirect speech?
When we change a request from direct into indirect speech, we use asked, and we can use the same constructions that we use for indirect questions or imperatives.
Give me an example, please.
We asked them if they could show us the way. Or, we asked them to show us the way.
Now, I will make some requests, and I want you to tell me what I said. Could you lend me your book, please?
You asked me if I could lend you my book. Or, you asked me to lend you my book.
Would you help me with my luggage, please?
You asked me if I would help you with your luggage. Or, you asked me to help you with your luggage.
Will you be quiet for a moment, please?
You asked me if I would be quiet for a moment. Or, you asked me to be quiet for a moment.
House. Home. Generally speaking. Housework. Wash up. Housewife. What, generally speaking, is the difference between the words house and home?
Generally speaking, the difference between the words house and home is that we use house when we are thinking about a physical building, whereas we use home in a more abstract sense to mean the place where we live or come from.
What time do you usually get home at the end of the day?
I usually get home at about 9:30 at the end of the day.
Do you think it's a good thing for boys and girls to leave home when they are teenagers?
No, I don't think it's a good thing for boys and girls to leave home when they are teenagers.
Why not?
Because they are not ready to be completely independent.
What's a housewife?
A housewife is a woman who does not have a job outside the home, but takes care of her home and family instead.
What's the difference between housework and homework?
The difference between housework and homework is that housework is the work we have to do in the house, such as washing, cleaning, washing up, etc., whereas homework is the work a pupil has to do at home.
Idiom 8. I couldn't care less equals it is of no interest or importance to me. What does the idiom I couldn't care less mean?
The idiom I couldn't care less means it is of no interest or importance to me.
Give me an example, please.
She has lost her job, but she says she couldn't care less because she can easily find another.
108. Hardly. What's the difference between he hardly works and he works hard?
The difference between he hardly works and he works hard is that he hardly works means that he does almost no work, whereas he works hard means that he works a lot.
If you had a car accident, but your car was hardly damaged, would you get it repaired, or would you just leave it?
If I had a car accident, but my car was hardly damaged, I'd just leave it.
Why do you think people continue to smoke, even when they have hardly any money?
I think people continue to smoke even when they have hardly any money, because smoking is a habit which is extremely difficult to break.
Has one student hardly finished answering one question before I ask another?
Yes, one student has hardly finished answering one question before you ask another.
Would you say it were hardly possible for a man to live all his life without ever being ill once?
Yes, I'd say it were hardly possible for a man to live all his life without ever being ill once.
Demand. Nerve. Name me a singer who's in great demand with the public these days.
Madonna is a singer who's in great demand with the public these days.
Where must we go to demand our rights?
We must go to a lawyer or to the law courts to demand our rights.
What kind of jobs make great demands on one's nerves?
The kind of jobs that make great demands on one's nerves are police officer, bus driver, teacher, and any kind of job where one has to work with the public.
Human. Nuclear. Do you think human life could continue if there was a nuclear war?
No, I don't think human life could continue if there was a nuclear war.
Why not?
Because everything would be destroyed.
Pair. Earring. What do we mean by a pair of earrings?
By a pair of earrings, we mean two earrings that are the same.
Wing. Can a bird fly with only one wing?
No, a bird can't fly with only one wing. It must have a pair of wings.
Painting. Original. Do you have any original paintings hanging up on the walls of your home?
No, I don't have any original paintings hanging up on the walls of my home.
What do we mean by an original idea?
By an original idea, we mean an idea that nobody has had before.
Time clause. Conditional clause. On condition that. What are two common types of dependent clause?
Two common types of dependent clause are time clauses and conditional clauses.
Give me a sentence with a time clause in it, please.
I bought some wine before I went home. After I eat breakfast, I always brush my teeth.
Give me a sentence with a conditional clause in it, please.
I would be able to fly if I was a bird. If she exercises every day, she will get fit.
Can we use future tenses in time clauses and conditional clauses?
No, we can't use future tenses in time clauses and conditional clauses.
What do we use instead?
We use present tenses instead.
Give me some examples, please.
She is going to buy a house in the countryside when she retires. They will call me tomorrow if they have any problems.
What are you going to do after you arrive home this evening?
I'm going to eat my dinner after I arrive home this evening.
Racehorse. Horse race. Racecourse. Race. Go on.
What's the difference between a racehorse, a horse race, and a racecourse?
The difference between a racehorse, a horse race, and a racecourse is that a racehorse is a horse we use for racing. A horse race is a race between horses, and a racecourse is a place where people meet in order to race horses.
Are there many different races in the world?
Yes, there are many different races in the world.
Do you think the human race will always go on living?
No, I don't think the human race will always go on living.
Why not?
Because everything comes to an end one day.
Unless equals except if. What does the word unless mean?
The word unless means except if.
Give me an example of unless, please.
We're going to arrive late unless we get a taxi.
Do you agree it's dangerous for a young child to cross the road unless they have an adult with them?
Yes, I agree it's dangerous for a young child to cross the road unless they have an adult with them.
About to. What am I about to do?
You're about to open the door, close your book, etc.
Idiom 9. Mind your own business equals not interfere with or ask questions about other people's personal lives. What does the idiom mind your own business mean?
The idiom mind your own business means not interfere with or ask questions about other people's personal lives.
Give me an example, please.
The world would be a much better place to live in if everyone minded their own business.
109. Rock. Roll. Rocking chair. Rocking horse. Wooden. Shape. What's the difference between to rock and to roll?
The difference between to rock and to roll is that to rock generally means to move backwards and forwards or from side to side, whereas to roll means to go round and round like a ball.
What's a rocking chair?
A rocking chair is a chair that moves backwards and forwards and is usually popular with old people.
What's a rocking horse?
A rocking horse is a wooden horse made for children, which rocks backwards and forwards.
If you were walking across a park and a ball rolled your way, would you kick it back to its owner or would you pick it up and throw it back?
If I were walking across a park and a ball rolled my way, I'd kick it back to its owner.
What am I doing?
You're rolling a piece of paper in your hands.
What's this?
It's a roll of paper.
What's a bread roll?
A bread roll is a piece of bread that has a round shape and is made for one person to eat.
Teacup. Cup of tea. What's the difference between a teacup and a cup of tea?
The difference between a teacup and a cup of tea is that a teacup is a cup for tea, whereas a cup of tea is a cup with tea in it.
What's the difference between a matchbox and a box of matches?
The difference between a matchbox and a box of matches is that a matchbox is a box for matches, whereas a box of matches is a box with matches in it.
Male. Female. Is a girl male or female?
A girl is female.
Who's your favourite male film star?
My favourite male film star is Alan Rickman.
Who's your favourite female film star?
My favourite female film star is Marilyn Monroe.
In the animal world, which is usually more colourful, the male or the female?
In the animal world, the male is usually more colourful than the female.
Deal. Profitable. Local. Poker. Banker. In return. What do you think's the best way to deal with bad children?
I think the best way to deal with bad children is to send them to bed without any food.
Which would you say was more profitable in business, to deal in cars or to deal in food?
I'd say that it was more profitable in business to deal in food.
Why?
Because everybody needs food.
Can you tell me the name of one of your local car dealers?
Yes, I can tell you the name of one of my local car dealers, Renault.
What do we call the person who deals the cards in a game of poker?
We call the person who deals the cards in a game of poker the dealer or the banker.
What do we mean when we say we make a deal with someone?
When we say we make a deal with someone, we mean we agree to give someone something in return for something they will give us, or to do something for someone in return for something they will do for us.
Or so. What do the words or so mean?
The words or so mean about.
Give me an example, please.
There were 35 people or so at the party.
Run a business, etc. Do you think you could run a large factory, or don't you think you could even run a small coffee shop?
I don't think I could run a large factory, or even run a small coffee shop.
Emphasizing pronouns. Case. What words can we use when we want to emphasize the person who does the action in a particular sentence?
When we want to emphasize the person who does the action in a particular sentence, we can use myself, yourself, himself, etc.
What do we call these words?
We call these words emphasizing pronouns.
Give me 3 sentences containing emphasizing pronouns, please.
I remember it very clearly because I gave him the money myself. People cannot usually repair laptops themselves. They have to take them to a computer repair center. She always drove the car herself.
Does someone else usually make breakfast for you, or do you make it yourself?
I usually make breakfast myself.
What's the difference between these 2 sentences? He painted the house himself, and he painted the house by himself.
The difference between these 2 sentences is that the first sentence emphasizes the fact that he painted the house himself, not someone else, whereas the second sentence means he painted the house alone without any help.
Does this door shut by itself?
No, this door doesn't shut by itself.
Do students answer questions in these lessons by themselves?
No, students don't answer questions in these lessons by themselves. The teacher helps them to answer.
Stand. Have you ever been anywhere in the world that was so hot that you couldn't stand the heat?
Yes, I've been somewhere in the world where it was so hot that I couldn't stand the heat.
Give me an example of something that you can't stand.
I can't stand noisy people or rap.
Idiom 10. Get a move on equals hurry. What does the idiom get a move on mean?
The idiom get a move on means hurry.
Give me an example, please.
If you get a move on, you might finish that job by the end of the day.
Lesson
Discovery.
110. Settle. Rested. Unsettled. Forever. Stir. United Nations. UN. Come on. Are there any mountains in your country where snow settles on the top, even in the middle of summer?
No, there aren't any mountains in my country where snow settles on the top, even in the middle of summer.
Would you be surprised if you were walking across a park and a bird came and settled on your shoulder?
Yes, I'd be surprised if I were walking across a park and a bird came and settled on my shoulder.
Would you find it difficult to settle in a foreign country forever?
No, I wouldn't find it difficult to settle in a foreign country forever.
Why not?
Because I would learn the ways of that country.
If you couldn't settle your bill in a restaurant because you didn't have enough money with you, what would you do?
If I couldn't settle my bill in a restaurant because I didn't have enough money with me, I'd phone a friend.
When you add sugar to a cup of coffee, what happens if you don't stir it?
When you add sugar to a cup of coffee and you don't stir it, the sugar settles to the bottom of the cup.
If 2 countries can't settle a political problem, where do they go in order to settle it?
If 2 countries can't settle a political problem, they go to the United Nations, UN, in order to settle it.
What does a teacher say to pupils when they are making too much noise?
A teacher says, "Come on now, settle down," to pupils when they are making too much noise.
If someone said that they were planning to go on holiday but that nothing had been settled yet, what would they mean?
If someone said that they were planning to go on holiday but that nothing had been settled yet, they would mean that they had not made any final decisions yet.
What do we mean by unsettled weather?
By unsettled weather, we mean weather that's constantly changing.
Partly. Would you say that success in life was partly a question of luck?
Yes, I'd say that success in life was partly a question of luck.
Brave. Do soldiers have to be extremely brave when they go into battle?
Yes, soldiers have to be extremely brave when they go into battle.
Tidy. What does it mean, to be tidy?
To be tidy means to keep things in their proper place.
Are you a tidy person?
Yes, I'm a tidy person.
Is it often difficult for parents to get their children to tidy their rooms?
Yes, it's often difficult for parents to get their children to tidy their rooms.
Act. Stage. Intermediate. Advanced. Have you ever acted on the stage in the theatre?
No, I've never acted on the stage in the theatre.
Would you be afraid to act on the stage?
No, I wouldn't be afraid to act on the stage.
At what stage of your English studies are you at the moment? Beginner, intermediate, or advanced?
I'm at an intermediate stage of my English studies at the moment.
At what stage of a man's life does his hair begin to drop out?
A man's hair can begin to drop out at any stage in his life. It depends on the individual.
Stream. Upstream. Downstream. On fire. What is a stream?
A stream is a small river.
If you followed a river upstream, where would it eventually lead you to?
If you followed a river upstream, it'd eventually lead you to the mountains or hills.
And if you followed it downstream, where would it eventually lead you to?
If you followed it downstream, it'd eventually lead you to the sea or a lake.
If you saw a stream of people streaming out of a building in a hurry, what did you think?
If I saw a stream of people streaming out of a building in a hurry, I'd think that either the building was on fire or that the people had just finished work.
Relative clauses. 2. Defining and non-defining clauses. Define. What are the two types of relative clause?
The two types of relative clause are defining and non-defining clauses.
What's the difference between a defining relative clause and a non-defining relative clause?
The difference between a defining relative clause and a non-defining relative clause is that a defining relative clause identifies which person or thing we are talking about, whereas a non-defining relative clause simply gives us extra information about them.
Give me an example of a sentence containing a defining relative clause, please.
The milk that you bought this morning is in the fridge.
Give me an example of a sentence containing a non-defining relative clause, please.
My new glasses, which I bought yesterday, are really expensive.
How is a non-defining clause separated from the main part of the sentence?
A non-defining clause is separated from the main part of the sentence by commas.
The woman that works in the library is very tall. The train that leaves at 6 p.m. is always full. But London, which is the capital of England, is very large. When can we use the relative pronoun that instead of who or which?
We can use the relative pronoun that instead of who or which in defining clauses. We cannot use that in non-defining clauses.
Give me an example, please.
The biscuits that I ate were very tasty.
Correct the mistake in this sentence, please. London, that is the capital of England, is a big city.
London, which is the capital of England, is a big city.
Idiom 11. For good equals forever. What does the idiom for good mean?
The idiom for good means forever.
Give me an example, please.
They're such a perfect couple, I'm sure they'll stay
Lesson
together for good.
111. Wave. Wavy. Distance. Rather than. What am I doing?
You're waving your hand.
What happens to the branch of a tree when it waves too much in the wind?
When the branch of a tree waves too much in the wind, it breaks and falls to the ground.
On what occasions do we wave our hands?
We wave our hands when we say goodbye to someone or when we want somebody to notice us from a distance.
Is it pleasant to travel by boat when the waves of the sea are very high?
No, it isn't pleasant to travel by boat when the waves of the sea are very high.
Why not?
Because it can be dangerous and also because we can get seasick.
Do you prefer wavy hair rather than straight hair?
Yes, I prefer wavy hair rather than straight hair.
Recommend. What do you recommend that people do in order to succeed in life?
I recommend that people remain determined in order to succeed in life.
Which film would you recommend seeing at the cinema at the moment?
I'd recommend seeing the film The Artist at the cinema at the moment.
If someone said they wanted a quiet holiday, which part of this country would you recommend to them?
If someone said they wanted a quiet holiday, I'd recommend Cornwall to them.
Gram. Pound. How many grams make a pound?
About 454 grams make a pound.
Injure. Injury. Wounds. Feelings. What, generally speaking, is the difference between an injury and a wound?
Generally speaking, the difference between an injury and a wound is that we use the word injury for something we receive by accident and wound for something we receive from fighting.
Have you ever seen anyone badly injured as the result of an accident?
No, I've never seen anyone badly injured as the result of an accident.
Do you know anyone who has been wounded in a war?
No, I don't know anyone who has been wounded in a war.
Are your feelings easily wounded or hurt?
Yes, my feelings are easily hurt.
Sincere. What do we mean if we say that somebody is not being sincere?
If we say that somebody is not being sincere, we mean that they are not expressing their true feelings.
Voluntary. Have you ever done any voluntary work?
Yes, I've done some voluntary work.
Do you think children ought to be made to study, or do you think studying ought to be voluntary?
I think children ought to be made to study.
Why?
Because otherwise they'd never study.
Separate. Separate. Read. Read. Use. Use. Separate. Separate. What's the difference between separate and separate?
The difference between separate and separate is that separate is the verb and separate is the adjective.
Formal letters and emails. Dear. Faithfully. Sincerely. Regards. How do we begin a formal letter or email if we don't know the name of the person we're writing to?
We begin a formal letter or email with the words Dear Sir or Dear Madam if we don't know the name of the person we're writing to.
How do we generally end such a letter or email?
We generally end such a letter or email with yours faithfully or something less formal like kind regards or best regards.
If we know the name of the person we are writing to, how do we begin a formal letter or email?
If we know the name of the person we're writing to, we begin a formal letter or email with Dear John.
And how do we end such a letter?
We end such a letter with the words yours sincerely or kind regards or best regards.
How do we usually begin an informal letter or email?
We usually begin an informal letter or email with the words Dear John or Hi John.
And how can we end such a letter or email?
We can end such a letter or email with best wishes or love, etc.
Reference. With reference to. What is a reference library?
A reference library is a library where we are allowed to read the books but we're not allowed to borrow them and take them home.
If we are answering a formal letter, how do we often begin our letter?
If we are answering a formal letter, we often begin our letter with reference to your letter of the 19th of January.
Goods. order, cancel, refund. What do we mean by the word goods?
By the word goods, we mean anything that can be bought or sold.
If you order goods online but they don't arrive, can you cancel the order and get a refund?
Yes, if I order goods online but they don't arrive, I can cancel the order and get a refund.
Condition. Conditions. Strike. How do we know when a dog is in good condition?
We know when a dog is in good condition when its coat is shining and its nose is cold and wet.
Why do people go on strike?
People go on strike because they want more money or better working conditions.
Do you think that people should have the right to strike?
Yes, I think that people should have the right to strike.
Post. Post office. Postbox. Letterbox. When you post a letter, do you take it to a post office or do you just put it in the nearest postbox?
When I post a letter, I put it in the nearest postbox.
Where do we find a letterbox?
We find a letterbox in a front door.
Manage. Manager. If you can't manage to answer a question, what does the teacher do?
If I can't manage to answer a question, the teacher helps me.
What does a manager do?
A manager manages a business or part of a business. That is, he makes important decisions about how the business operates.
Beauty. Which do you think it's better to possess? Brains, beauty, or money?
I think it's better to possess brains.
Why?
Because brains last longer than beauty, and without brains, you'd lose all your money.
Corn. Cereal. What can we make from corn?
We can make bread, cereal, and many other types of food from corn.
Weed. What do we do with weeds in a garden?
We pull weeds out of a garden and either burn them or throw them away.
Idiom 12. Just the job equals exactly what is needed. What does the idiom just the job mean?
The idiom just the job means exactly what is needed.
Give me an example, please.
That trip to the countryside last weekend was just the job. I feel so relaxed now.